have a chance for faculty and staff to share what they're already doing in their classroom. We know that a lot of this is already being integrated, and you know, just want to give those that are doing the work an opportunity to showcase it, and all the rest of us to an opportunity to ask some questions and learn from it. So I'm super excited to be involved, and again, to look at this, you know, sustainability and sustainable development just in this really holistic, larger way that the SDGs give us the capacity to do so. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chilton. We've given each presenter about 10 minutes to introduce what they're doing in their work, and then we will have questions at the end. So go ahead, Chilton. Thank you.
All right, so good morning all, and thanks. It's good to see you, and thanks for letting me be a part of this today. I'm presenting today as my role as our COIL coordinator on campus. COIL is our a mechanism that allows you to do collaborative things with people from around the world and other countries, with your students working with other students. And I'll kind of explain that in a second, but first I want to give the background of why I'm talking today. Is that the reason I come to the Sustainable Development Goals is because I'm realizing that a lot of the work that we do with our partners around the world really fits into the framework of what we're talking about. And so we've made a concerted effort to try to have our COIL projects that go on campus try to focus on one of these 7 sustainability goals, Sustainable Development Goals, excuse me, because it allows just a greater framework and a larger reason for doing what we're doing with our students. So I'm going to kind of go through the process of what COIL looks like, just to give you a little bit better idea, and then how you can get involved and how you can think about as you hear all the presenters over the course of this whole series. If you're like, wow, that's a great thing, I'm doing something with that, but would like to get more involved, maybe with somebody from Colombia or India or somewhere else in the world where we can help get partnerships, then it gives you a greater framework on thinking about how you can get students involved in doing this as well. So as far as COIL itself, what COIL is a project that happens inside of your class where you have your students do a project with students from another country. So if you notice, the little part in the white text is the length of the project itself. It's usually not the whole semester. This is something where we're talking about one project that takes about 4 to 6 weeks sometime in the semester. So a lot of people hear this and think they have to do something with their whole class and it has to line up exactly with another class, and that's not the case. What we really help you do is find somebody that might actually be interdisciplinary that you could work with. And think about, ooh, how could I do just this project where I might be focusing on the content and it's a visual graphic group that's creating a visual for that. We're both collecting data on things from different places, bringing it together so we have a larger, richer data set to work with for the project that we're doing. So your class would have its regular content. We really focus on trying to get you to think about what's one project that you're already doing that you could just expand a little bit, so it's not a huge new thing that you're adding in, but kind of complements something you're already doing. So that's the point of this, is just to say, hey, this is not a semester-long thing. It is a 4 to 6 week project that you do in the middle of the semester, working with students from another country. When we talk about the timeline, then, if you're thinking about doing something for the fall semester, now is a great time to start to talk about it. We can either help you find a partner. We've created some connections around the world. We are part of a COIL center, which is the SUNY COIL Center, that also helps find partners around the world. Or if you already have somebody that you're working with, you can talk with them already to do that. So once you find a partner, then we kind of work with you on the process to say, okay, what does that project look like? What do I want to get out of the end of it? How can we embed one of the SDGs into this and be able to kind of think about that process? So we can help you do that and do a lot of the planning. There's a lot of little nitty-gritty stuff like, what's the time zone difference? Do they have daylight savings time or not? And some of that little nitty-gritty stuff, but also then how do we make sure that we can find a place for your students and those students to work together? So we'll support you through that process of getting all of it planned out, figuring out what technology tools will work best for whatever project you are doing, and then support you through the implementation of that project in the semester when you're actually teaching it. So I'm going to stop my presentation there and then just talk a little bit more about that. of just saying then what our goal in this is to let you know, hey, there are multiple ways to get your students involved in this. COIL is one way you could do that. So if you're thinking about, hey, I already do something around no poverty, then we can try and help you find somebody that's doing something around no poverty, whether it is a different discipline or the same discipline. We can kind of help support you through that process. So as you're listening to the different presenters, you're like, ooh, that's a great idea. I'd like that framework. And then you can reach out to us and say, hey, I'd love to be able to work with somebody on SDG number 12, or whatever makes sense to you. But for us, we want to support you in doing that and give our students a greater framework, so that once they do that project, we can also then reach back out to this group and say, hey, these students just finished something about no poverty. What are some other ways on our campus they could get involved? What are some other ways that they can become more invested in this beyond just this one project that hopefully was a good introduction to that? And I'll stop there and just want to see if there's any questions for me at the moment.
And thank you, Chilton, for bringing up the fact that although these the goals are kind of discrete goals, they really work together and support one another. So that's what we're here to talk about, to see how you all are bringing them up in your in your work, and then how we can all integrate those those ideas as well. And again, this is, thought sharing. Please feel free to jump in with questions, comments, and we'll have some more time for questions at the end. We actually have Florian, who was presenting our last topic, is unable to present today, so we'll have a little more time, hopefully, to wrap it up and to get some more questions after all of our presenters.
The one final thing I'll say is we are recording these sessions. I think some of you saw that, so that if you want to come back and be able to see these, we'll be able to share them out afterwards as well. So thank you. I look forward to talking more about it.
Okay, and now I'll turn it over to Philip Sirianni in economics and business, and he will be presenting on number 8, decent work and economic growth. Thanks, Philip.
Thanks, Rachel, and thanks to the committee for inviting me to talk about this goal today. So the full language of this one is it's decent work and economic growth, and it's to promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. I think just from reading that, you can see that this goal really can't be disentangled from some of the others, right? Reduced inequality, gender equality, no poverty, and climate action, I think, are some of the other key goals that are directly linked to this one. I'm not a macro economist. I teach microeconomics, and natural resource economics and environmental economics are more like applied microeconomics. But I'll play a macroeconomist today. And so maybe I have a biased opinion. I think that economics, the economics of every sustainable development goal needs to be evaluated. It's important. And at its core, economics is the study of what we can and can't do, what we can and can't have, given the resource constraints that we face. There are trade-offs that always have to be made. One example of this is there's a widely held view among economists that there's a link between the price inflation in an economy, how quickly the prices of things are going up, and the amount of unemployment that there is in an economy. So if there's like low unemployment, lots of people employed, lots of people spending money, that could cause prices to accelerate quickly. Whereas if there's low levels of employment, there's lots of unemployment, not a lot of people are spending money, then inflation is low. And so there's this kind of link between the two. And the position of the Federal Reserve is that there is some what they call natural rate of unemployment. It's some level of unemployment that's quote unquote necessary to hold inflation steady. So if the goal is truly full employment and sustainable economic growth, then there's a big picture question that I think we have to ask as a society, and that's what economic systems or frameworks would be best for achieving this goal. Is it the current system, or is there another economic paradigm that might do better? There's a relatively new framework for thinking about the economy that is gaining some traction among economists, and we're starting to put in the US a little bit of this into practice. We're starting to test this theory a little bit, and this theory is called modern monetary theory. Maybe some of you have heard of it. It's abbreviated as MMT, which I think is very fitting for our discussion today. MMT economists, who are growing in number, reject the idea, not only in principle or philosophically, but also from a practical standpoint, that there have to be some sacrificial lambs who remain unemployed so that our orange juice doesn't get too expensive. And to support this argument, MMT economists point to the fact that for well over a decade, inflation has remained well below the target level for the Federal Reserve, which is about 2%, despite the fact that we've had declining unemployment and growing budget deficits. And so it follows from that we could be doing a lot more in terms of stimulus, employment stimulus or government stimulus more generally. Modern monetary theory, just to give you a little bit of the way that modern monetary theorists think, is that they start with the following idea, the following baseline, which is don't think of the US government as a household that has to balance its budget, that has to first tax and borrow the money that they can then spend. Because there's a big difference between the user of a currency, that's us, that's the households, and the issuer of a currency, that's our government. The government can always pay its debts or pay for goods and services or hire people for public projects by creating more dollars so that budget deficits are not in and of themselves problematic. That sounds great, but I think we all know, right? What's the key concern about the government printing or creating money and then dropping it from helicopters? Well, it would be inflation, price inflation, that the dollar becomes less valuable. But modern monetary theorists argue that, well, as long as there is what we call slack in the economy, and slack is like unemployment or it's idle capital, it's resources that are available that are being underutilized, that as long as you have this situation, then inflation concerns are overblown. And if you're in a recession, then there's even less to worry about. And again, they point to our experience over the last decade. And they also argue not all countries have this ability to be able to create money to fund stimulus. But the US does have this ability for a couple of reasons. One is the slack that is in our economy, the unemployment. The other is that US dollars are very desirable, both at home and this is the key, around the world. So not only is our currency highly valued, but we're not even employing all of the resources that are available to us. And so this gives us the ability to do a lot more than we are doing, such as spending funds that could work directly toward achieving this sustainable development goal and the others. For example, the government could make substantial investments in green energy infrastructure, which creates new jobs and addresses climate action. And a key point made by MMT economists is that you can do this without crowding out private sector investment, that you can maintain a healthy mix of both public and private spending. And so there are other policy prescriptions that would follow from this: the infrastructure, climate investments, and pollution reduction initiatives, and creation of sustainable jobs. Other possible policies would be raising the federal minimum wage, and possibly even a federal jobs guarantee. But the bottom line is that modern monetary theory, MMT, advocates for significantly greater public spending in many forms, and many of which would address this and other sustainable development goals directly. Now, there are economists on the other end of the spectrum that argue that private sector or free market capitalism is the best way to achieve this goal, where if you have no government intervention in private enterprise, then that will result for the greatest good for the greatest number. Most mainstream economists agree that there's some healthy mix of public and private engagement. And most mainstream economists, including yours truly, are skeptical of modern monetary theory, particularly the part about not having to worry so much about inflation. It's a theory. It's a relatively new theory. It's gaining traction, hasn't really been tested. But under the Biden administration, we're going to test it a little bit. There's $1.9 trillion recently, on top of, I think it was $2 trillion before. And there's a proposal for a $2+ trillion infrastructure plan. And so we will see what happens in terms of prices, and we'll be putting, I think, some of these ideas of modern monetary theory to the test. So that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has about that or this goal or anything else later. I think we'll do it later. Is that right, Rachel? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I think what we'll do is we'll go through the presentations and then we'll do questions. So thank you so much. I really learned a lot. I'm unspotlighting you. Great. Okay. And so now let's move to Sarah Portway, assistant professor in human ecology, who teaches in fashion and textiles, who's going to be presenting on number 12, responsible consumption and production. Thank you.
Hi, it's kind of fitting that I'm following an economist. I also teach fashion in the global economy, and that tends to be where my line of thinking lands quite a bit. So one of the, we had our list of questions. So how did I become passionate about this topic? I got really curious about where does the money flow? Evidently, I'm of a newer school of economic thinking. And so I was really, I grew up outside and spent a lot of time near lakes. I'm Canadian, and I noticed as we started building more cottages on the lake where I lived, that it got frothy and dirty, and I swam in that lake every single day. So I really noticed it over, the 2 decades or so that I lived there. And so that was sort of my first kind of entry point into thinking about the environment as a whole. And then, I started working in fashion but at the same time, I was hanging out with a lot of like-minded folks. You might call them hippies. We all lived in arts house together in college, or my first degree. So you can imagine the scene there. And, I was unpacking new boxes of stock every day and thinking a lot about where does, who made this stuff and where does it all go in the end? So the SDG that I'm here to talk about, which I might have just skipped over a little bit, is responsible consumption. And so, that's defined as ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns, which, the fashion industry, depending on how you count it, is valued somewhere between $3 trillion and $4 trillion. So, we're talking big money, a big part of the overall economy. And so, and here in the United States, we actually represent about 4% of the population, and we consume about 25% of all the clothing that is produced in the world. So that is a very disproportionate amount. And that was really what got me really passionate about this topic. Like, what's going on there and what can we do to maybe think a little, shop with our values a little more? Because people, when you hear the word sweatshop, that hurts, right? And, you know, I think that the thing that everybody should know, the next question that you gave me, is that we do have the power. So, personal anecdote, I'm in this yoga class, yoga teacher comes in, fabulous rainbow pants on. And she starts the class by saying, oh, I know you're all looking at my pants. Aren't they fabulous? They only cost me like $12. Too bad, they were probably made in a sweatshop in China. And I was like that class, I couldn't see the faces here recognize how that's a problem. The faces in this hipster yoga studio in Ithaca did not notice that that was a problem, and they giggled. My partner was there next to me and just shot me this look like, oh, we're drinking later. So, you know, like we don't connect the fact that we could have not bought that $12 pair of pants, you know, and then we make jokes about our own consumption, or we brag about the deal we got. Someone gets the short end of that stick. And it's not the fashion brand, although they do work on razor thin margins, especially in fast fashion. They don't really have a lot of wiggle room if they offer that $12 pant. So once I started thinking about the economics of that, who gets left holding, you know, the short end of that stick, that was really what called my attention to, you know, I think everybody needs to know sustainable fashion is an oxymoron. Fashion is predicated on continued consumption, new trends every time. You need the newest, coolest thing. Our students need a new outfit for every Instagram post. Like, our students shop daily. And this might, you know, I'm just throwing that out there. Like, I ask them all the time, how often are you shopping? What are you buying? How often? And they learn about sustainable fashion, and they're still flocking to stores like H&M, Forever 21, Zara, Shein, Boohoo. You know, if you want my advice, I would avoid all of that. Just no. So there are environmental issues here as well, and labor issues. So I thought maybe a mental image might help. If you look in your closet and you imagine how much is there that you don't wear, or how much is there that still has a tag on it, or how much is there that you got as a freebie at some fun run that you went to or campus event, you know, and it's never going to get worn, and you didn't even really want it in the first place. Like, a human made that, and that traveled across the world to get here. So those are the, you know, that's kind of what I'm thinking about here. And about 6% of what we toss out is textile waste, according to the most recent numbers that I could find, which were about 2019. So, and that's according to the EPA. And the Council for Textile Recycling points out that about the average for a US citizen is about 70 pounds of tossed out textiles per year. So, you know, you might think about how many textiles you're throwing out. So, you know, on the other side, another mental image, you know, you're working in a factory, you work 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. No, you know, you're not meeting your expenses for basic living standards. You are, you know, you have no right to unionize. You're working with toxic equipment. And you find out that people in the US are not even wearing what you made, you know, like, just even the weight of that from a social justice perspective, like how undervalued a person might feel in their work, knowing that, or sensing that disparity, the wealth gap there that's being created by fast fashion. So, and then, so the solution, right? You know, the solution we're often given is, oh, donate your clothes. Great, take it down to the thrift shop. But, you know, in my own research, I have heard people say, oh, well, when I'm done with my shoes and they have a bunch of holes in them, I take them to the thrift shop so that I can recycle them. And then I'll ask them, like, okay, when you go shopping for thrift shop, you know, in a thrift shop, are you interested in the pair of sneakers that is past its useful life? You know, are you interested in the pair of holed sneakers? Oh, well, I guess not. I was like, so who would be? You know, oh, people who are needy. It's like, there are enough clothes to go around. They can get a better quality shoe right next to that piece of, trash now. And so recycling isn't recycling through these thrift shops is not the option. And, those of you who do thrift, you're probably not looking for the stained shirt, right? You're probably not looking for the crappy fabric that is going to show your sweat stains because you can see somebody else is in it. So, you're not looking for that stuff either. And as an avid thrifter, like I'm always looking for nice fabrics. Like I zoom in, I just look at the shoulder of everything and I'm like, yes, that one right there, that looks nice. And that's what thrifters do. So, so that's not the solution. We also have fast fashion brands having these take back programs, where, oh, bring your clothes back to us and we'll recycle it. It's all BS. H&M does this. They give you a 10% coupon for bringing back your stuff. So they're encouraging more consumption, which is like step one, reduce, right? Reduce the amount of stuff you're buying. It's not responsible to do that, but they do not have the facilities to recycle that. And I know this from personal research that I did with my advisor at Cornell, where we were in direct competition with H&M to figure out how to recycle textiles. And when that solution comes, great. Until then, it's greenwashing. It's not true. They're collecting that stuff and it's piling up in a Swedish warehouse. That's what's happening. They also donate their end of season merchandise to refugee camps. Sounds nice, but when you think about maybe the cultural values shared in some refugee camps, they probably don't want the teeny sequin dress that the 20-year-old was going to wear to a New Year's Eve party where the sequins all fell off, so it didn't get sold during the regular season. So H&M shipped it. And if someone were to wear it, I have heard that stuff also just piles up and it has to be kept inside because it gets wet and then becomes a harbor of disease, malaria in particular. So, this displaces people. They have to live outside where these donations from H&M, which they get a tax cut for, sits inside. So herein lies a few of the problems that we never maybe thought about. If I just exploded your mind, I'm sorry. Or if you already knew all this, great. But this is like the hidden supply chain that most people aren't thinking about. So how does this, how does this really relate back to that sustainable development goal? We also have a lot of manufacturing happening in concentration camps in China. Investigative reporting is talking about this right now, and it's a big issue happening this week in the fashion industry. A lot of brands are cutting ties. China's getting a little upset. Influencers are not dropping, Nike in particular. There are some challenges there, right? So even in our efforts to consume more responsibly, there are these side effects. And people on the other side of the world also need employment too. So you can't just pull out of these areas automatically. So really what we're intersecting with here, the next question you gave me, how does this intersect with the other SDGs? I have a list of 8 or 9 that it really intersects with. We're talking about poverty. We're talking about health and well-being. For example, the chromium that's used to tan leather is a known carcinogen. And there's a really great Pulitzer article showing the safety equipment being used, which is actually nothing. People are just standing in flip-flops and vats of chromium tanning leather. Kids too. So good health and well-being, gender equality. Most of these people are females, right? Or identify as female, and sexual abuse is rampant. The bosses are often identified as male, and the workers often identify as female. There is often restrictions placed on their movement around in these workshops that are usually third-tier manufacturing, whole other thing. So we're also talking about reduced inequality. We're also talking about decent work and economic growth, right? What would be a better solution? A lot of this stuff ends up in the water. So we have life below water really taken there. And a lot of big brands will actually specifically manufacture in countries where they have lax environmental laws. It is a lot easier to dump some chemicals than to recycle them or clean them properly. And in some of these places, we also are using that same water supply downstream to drink, eat, cook, feed, I guess you don't eat water, pardon me, got carried away there, cooking. So, we can see instances of like higher instances of birth defects, and it's horrific what's happening. If you're interested in more on that, watch River Blue. It talks about some really disturbing things like hidden pipes that you can't identify what factory they come from because they're buried underwater and they're just dumping like toxic chemicals in these rivers. So consumers are saying they don't care with their dollars. Yet in food, we understand refuse, reduce, recycle, reuse, right? So we understand the 3 R's, but we fail to maybe apply that same framework to our clothing. So that is really, something the general public can do to get involved. The last question. Don't pretend that our consumption is somehow removed from the problem. Oh, I don't buy a lot of clothes, or oh, I let somebody else buy my clothes for me. That might sound great, but like, where are they getting them? Like, take responsibility for your own consumption. Refuse to buy from brands that don't match your values. You can actually check sustainability reports. I get my students to look over the H&M one. It's filled with words like, we plan to, we hope to, we strive for. And I don't see a lot of what have you done for me lately. So refuse, reduce, just buy less stuff. You don't need as much probably, and you can refuse the Fun Run t-shirt as well. You can also reuse. So thrifting, and there's some great online stores now, The RealReal if you're looking for luxury, Poshmark if you're looking for middle market, and ThredUp if you're looking for maybe lower end. Those are 3 great options where you can get secondhand clothing that are in really great condition. For the luxury RealReal, they actually verify everything too, so it's way less sketchy than like your eBay. And then you can recycle. That should be the very last priority because we know there's problems in the recycling supply chain. And there are researchers that are working on how we can recycle clothing, but we are just not there yet. So in the meantime, I want the general public to get involved with reduce, reuse, and refuse. Pretty much in the refuse, reduce, reuse order. Sorry, I should say it in that order. Getting carried away here. So that is my response to those questions. I would really love the general public to be involved in that way.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I think your presentation really highlighted all of the connections, these hidden connections that we don't necessarily think of. We think about clothes, we think economics, we think about design. We're not thinking about the people the people creating it, the resources used, the pollution related to it, where that money goes. This is, I think, such a great showcase of the Sustainable Development Goals in real life. So thank you so much. And so now, we have some time to open it up for questions. Feel free to ask questions to our presenters, or feel free to open this up to the group as a whole. We really wanted this to be a chance for us all to share possibly what we're doing already, how you think about the Sustainable Development Goals, questions you have on them, what the place of them is in your coursework, things like that. So we're open to it all. And Mina, please go ahead.
I have a question for Sarah. Thank you for such an enthusiastic presentation. I mean, those are really valid points. And I was just curious, do you think after the pandemic, people's consumption habits will change? I mean, I teach strategic management, and we have a conversation about corporate social responsibility. And when we were talking about that, my students mentioned that they realize how much less things they need in life. I mean, there was some conversation about it. And I'm just curious, do you think it will change in a positive way after, hopefully, the pandemic is over?
So that's, there is a lot of speculation on that right now, actually. That's a big conversation that we're having in some of the trade publications, like The Business of Fashion, which I read daily, because it is really got the finger on the pulse of this exact issue. One of the things they are talking about as a business trend for 2022 would be this, it's called, working justice for workers or something. I can't remember the exact name, but that's the thrust. We're thinking about justice for these garment workers that are on the other side of the world. And it is as a result of this pandemic, we've had a lot of news that came out about when production stopped and what happened to the workers. And that, I think, like sparked a little bit of awareness, but but the findings that I have in my research, I'm going to have an Eeyore moment, like, ooh. The findings in my research are that even if people don't know or know, they don't really care because they don't think they can spend more. I would argue that refusing and then reducing means spending less, but I have a hard time getting my students to buy in on that because of the social norms. And fashion is really dictated by social norms. So, that's where we start getting into those style factors, which really complicate the issue. So yeah, but, if Rana Plaza's collapse, which was one of the largest industrial accidents ever, and over 1,400 people died, and it was widely publicized, Fashion Revolution Day is coming up on the 24th to commemorate that event. If that didn't work, I don't know what's gonna. And I know a woman who actually saw her mother working in a textile sweatshop and did not make the connection between her own clothing and her mother's labor. She was from China and she had seen it firsthand and did just disconnect. I don't think we want to see it. And I don't know if that's changed. I think it's going to come down to price and style.
Ria.
Hey, we had a great discussion in relation to this question in our sustainability PLC, because we're reading All We Can Save. And Dr. Catherine Finnan, who teaches Sustainable Humanities, was talking about having a whole project with her students on, and she should speak about this, not me, but we can connect to her, speak with her students about how they can actually consume less. And when they worked on that, how happy and empowered they felt. So it was a whole project as part of a course. And she said the energy it created was really wonderful. So I think she might be a good resource in terms of how to get that conversation started so we can start small in our own community, just talking about, wait a minute, I don't need this. And I don't have to worry about wearing that. I can spend more time doing the things I like to do with the people I like to do with. So yeah, this is a connecting conversation.
MC, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Well, I would like to bring here the importance of bringing COIL, whatever your discipline is, because sometimes, and I think often, if we are immersed in our own culture, we don't see connections, we don't connect, we don't compare. But if we have the opportunity to allow our students to collaborate, just prompting them with a simple question, depending on our discipline, with someone from another culture, we will find out how students, young people like our own students, consume in another country, and be able to evaluate our own consumption practices. I remember I grew up in a country that I had to think what I can afford. And after I came to the United States and have been here 28 years, I think I have changed a lot, and not in a very positive way towards consumption. I have access to things that I didn't have before. And when I went back, I had the opportunity to go back to my own country and spend 6 months there. I was feeling guilty every time I bought things. I was feeling I am behaving like an American. And people here do not use this, do not need this, can live without it. And I'm not. And my kids are not. So I was able to see myself in another context and be able to compare. And I think that's what happens when we integrate COIL, and we allowed our students to have the conversations, not among themselves that are from the same experience, but with someone from another place. So I just wanted to add that COIL, I think, is a channel to allow us to think and prompt our students to think.
Thank you, MC. And that's a good reminder that the Sustainable Development Goals are for international development, right? These can't be dealt with in discrete societies or in country, nationally. These are global issues that we're talking about. When we're talking about climate change, it's transnational, transborder, equality, poverty. These are things that people are dealing with all around the world, and we need to see it as one. Philip, when you were talking and you were talking about this new wave of economics, I was really excited because I thought you were going to be talking about the circular economy. And, and I thought that there would be some of that like full scale pricing or reporting. And, this idea that like you mentioned with the orange juice, how does it stay so cheap, and that there are ways to include all of that, but that's just not our priority. And I guess I'd like to ask you from your perspective, as what are things that we can do to show our priorities to uplift the economy in a way that we want to, see it. Thank you.
So, and I think I had mentioned maybe a few of the policies, the policy prescriptions that could follow from this view of government stimulus and government investment from the public sector into things like infrastructure and climate investments. I think I haven't read through. I've been kind of busy the last couple of days, and I haven't read through the details of the infrastructure plan that's being proposed. I know it's a little over $2 trillion, and it has quite a bit in it, is my understanding, as far as green energy, improving the grid for green energy delivery, and significant investment in electric vehicles, in electric vehicle manufacturing, and then powering those vehicles with energy coming from green sources, such as solar, hydro, and wind, and moving away from fossil fuel energy. And so this is, one of those areas where jobs can be created, and we hear this argument made all of the time, that jobs can be created, good jobs in green energy, and at the same time, reducing, and this is the more global, right? These jobs are at home. A lot of what I was talking about were things that the U.S. could do, right? Policies that the U.S. could do in terms of employment here. And I think that, where that employment occurs, if it's occurring in green energy, for example, well, that's obviously going to have an impact globally in terms of, say, climate, right, and slowing the rate of emissions and mitigating climate change. And so I think that that's going to be a part of this plan, and I think that we will only see more of these policies, at least over the next few years. What I think will be interesting to see is, does this go through with a tax cut or with a tax increase, which is also part of the proposal, or does it not, right? And obviously, when you start talking about taxes and who is going to be taxed, well, now you're also addressing another one of the goals, reduced inequality. And so, so I think, it can't be disentangled from the others. And that's really, a key point, I think, is that, the decent work and economic growth, it can be related to that idea of reducing inequality, of gender equality, of climate action, and poverty in particular. And I didn't mention the first question was what gets you interested in this topic, and so in terms of me for economics, and like I said, my area is natural resource and environmental economics, and I grew up in western New York, western part of New York State, kind of more rural area. Grew up doing a lot of fly fishing and being outside, enjoying the outdoors. And it was also an area with a lot of poverty. And a lot of, during my lifetime, a lot of businesses have moved, they've closed. There was just an announcement a few weeks ago that there's a plant that employs about 800 people in my hometown. There's about 12,000 people. And so 800 is it's a substantial amount. That they will be shutting down all manufacturing operations and laying off 500 of the workers. So you're talking now 500 families, a plant, idle capital, right? And this is kind of what MMT advocates for, that if you've got these plants that are shut down and people who are unemployed, that funds could be directed to that without the overblown fears of price inflation. The key is that the government is not competing, that the public sector isn't competing with the private sector for whatever's being produced in that plant. Because if they're competing with the private sector for whatever's being produced there, then that drives prices up, right? But the government could just say, well, we want to make this a solar panel manufacturing plant, and we will purchase X number of solar panels from the plant. And as long as they're not competing for the private sector, then they can do that without having to worry about inflation. That's really what's kind of at the core of this way of thinking about the economy. It's very different from the way that most mainstream economists and just economists historically have thought about it. We're going to test it, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
So thanks so much, everyone. We have, just a few minutes left. I popped a form in the chat. As mentioned, the, self-appointed committee, we just want to start these conversations, and this form will just let us know if you're interested in being involved with more of these things in the future. We also have a list of resources that we want to share out. Our goal right now is to have these faculty-focused spotlights this semester, and then possibly next semester doing something focused for students. So either having other students share about their involvement in the goals, or faculty and staff sharing about how students can get involved. So this is all evolving, and it's certainly, the more the merrier in making this really a campus initiative. So please fill out that form. Keep in touch. Our next session is on Friday, April 9th. I'm going to share my screen for one more time to just show you this. Maybe it will share here. Yeah. So here we go. We have Friday, April 9th. They're all at 11 a.m. So we have, we had this one on Thursday. We're trying to get as many people as we can. So we have Friday, April 9th, the 15th, and the 23rd with, again, more faculty and staff from campus talking about the SDGs, how it relates to their work, how we can get involved, an opportunity for discussion. So thanks so much, everyone. I hope your day is... I can't see anybody, and now my computer is doing its things. But I hope your day is not too, oh, here we go. I found you. I'm stopping sharing, is not to April Fool-y from here on out, because I've had enough already today. I'm ready for April 2nd. So thanks everyone. Feel free to unmute for final comments, pop, anything in the chat, and we'll be in touch. And thank you so much to our presenters.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Good to see everyone.
You too.
Thank you for inviting me. I had a great time.
Sarah, I have a question for you.
Oh, yeah.
Because I feel like I agonize about throwing away